What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take No Offense. A couple of old friends who grew up together in Pennsylvania. Now we live on opposite sides of the country. This is our chance to get together once a week to share our thoughts on politics, sports, and entertainment. I'm Eric Messersmith in the Los Angeles area. Brian Johnson in suburban Washington, D.C. What's going on, buddy?
Not much, dude. I feel like I owe our listening audience an apology. I accidentally kicked my computer over last week, and my microphone didn't work, so it was a bit of a disaster. I mean, our production team really needs to get better, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, they do. I totally blame them. So,
Yeah,
for our four listeners, the four people who were bitterly disappointed that there was no episode last week, Brian, and when he says he kicked his computer, he
yeah,
literally means that. He literally means he sat
accidentally.
back in his chair, accidentally pulled the cord with his foot that knocked the computer off the table,
Yeah,
ending our stream and deleting the recording
that's
forever.
right.
So that I joked afterwards, Brian, that was like the Lost Beatles, like a Lost Beatles recording session.
I mean,
Pretty
it
much the
doesn't.
same cultural impact.
It is. It doesn't matter, but man, there was some good stuff in there. So we'll do it again this week. It's all right. We'll do it
I'll
again.
take your word for it. I don't even remember. Time goes by so quickly. I think we were probably starting with Trump last week and some moves of the Trump administration. So we'll do that again this week because
Sure.
that is
That's the
that
news.
is the news. Where to begin? Let's start with the big news of the day, which involved the situation in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. Today,
That
a
Ukraine started.
delegation. Right. That's where I wanted to begin. So if you didn't see the news today, we had a meeting. By we, I mean Marco Rubio led an American delegation with high-ranking Russian officials in Saudi Arabia. They didn't agree to anything in terms of ending the war, but they agreed to kind of re-establish diplomatic communications at their embassies and begin the process of ending the war. Not at that meeting, the Europeans, and not at the meeting, Ukraine, who obviously is one of the two sides in the Russian Ukraine war. Well, today, Trump talked about that at a press conference at Mar a Lago, and he kind of threw Zelensky under the bus. He said he likes Zelensky, but he echoed, there's no other way to say this, he echoed the Russian talking points that it was Ukraine who started the war and that Ukraine could have ended the war with a deal early on, which technically that is true. Ukraine could have just given up basically and
Right.
just let Russia have most of its country and not had any security guarantee for the future. And you're right. They could have done that. They obviously weren't going to do that. This is like one of these right-wing conspiracy theories. And this is my biggest problem with Trump is despite the gifts that he does have, he's like a living, breathing version of the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories because he internalizes them. And on some things that doesn't really matter. It doesn't have much of a practical impact. But on something like this, that is literally the view that Russia has, which isn't true. We all know who started the war. It wasn't Ukraine. It was Russia back in 2014, actually, when they took Crimea. And then specifically 3 years ago, almost 3 years to the day, when they literally invaded the country and tried to take it over.
Yeah.
So this is, look, we should wait and judge on the final results. But I will say, just like I've said with a lot of things, I don't like the signs. I don't like where this is going. It seems to be we are heading down the path of selling Ukraine out. I hope I'm wrong, but that seems like where we're headed.
My first thought was, does it actually matter in the grand scheme of things if this method of, I mean, I hate to use the word appeasement because of its fascist connotations, but appeasing Russia to the extent that we're telling their narrative, if it does end up with European forces in Ukraine and not U.S. troops, and Russia ceases, it's a hostile takeover of a sovereign nation, does the narrative matter really? I don't know if it does or it doesn't. It may not. I'm not saying this is Trump playing 3D chess. I think it's probably delusion, but it may not strategically be the worst idea. What do you think about that?
You're saying if European troops are in
Ukraine, if
Ukraine?
Europe decides to back Ukraine and move troops in, and it somehow keeps us out of Ukraine, and Russia ceases their invasion, I mean, it'll probably pick back up in a few years, but if it did lead to some type of peace in the moment, would that be the worst thing?
Well, yeah. No, I mean, look, it depends on what is a lasting guarantee to come out of it. It's all about the details. Like
Right.
if this is Trump just kind of bloviating, and at the end of the day they work a deal that really is actually very fair to Ukraine, then I'll be the first to say, hey, I was wrong when he was echoing the Putin talking points and all of the other things we've seen, and he got a good deal. That's because that is what matters at the end, not what he says today.
Yeah, right.
I think what he's saying today gives you a clue about what he's thinking. Also, the fact that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, came out and said Ukraine's not going to be in NATO. Ukraine is not going to have to give up territory. Trump essentially backed those things up. Like, even if you believe those things to be true, which they probably are, you don't say them out loud. You don't give up the leverage before the negotiation, because what matters, to your point, is what is Russia deterred significantly from future aggression
Yes.
against Ukraine? That is all that matters. The rest of it is just kind of, details around the edge. Like, is this what we could be headed toward? Is a Munich moment. Neville Chamberlain, peace in
Yeah.
our time, after they went and
Yeah.
negotiated with Hitler and they let him have parts of Czechoslovakia. Like, I'm not saying that.
Well, that's
Putin's
why I
Hitler,
used appeasement.
although, right, I don't know that he doesn't have the power Hitler has, and thankfully. But my point is, Putin is a terrible, awful human being who's a war criminal and isn't going to stop just because he likes Trump. What he will do, I think, what Putin's end goal is to get as much territory as he can now, end the war, leave Ukraine in a weakened state with no real security guarantee, wait till Trump leaves, and then go right back to it.
Well, that's what
I
I'm
think
suggesting.
that is right. But if, on the other hand, what you said, where there actually is a force on the ground in Ukraine,
Yes.
whether it be European, whether it be NATO, and that force is there to deter Russia. And if Russia were to attack, that force would be ready to respond. That would be a great result. I would love that result. I don't think there is a chance in hell Russia is going to allow that unless Trump forces them through hard negotiation to do it. And that is what I worry about. Because I worry about us leaving Ukraine to basically fend for itself, and Putin deciding he's just going to wait Trump out. And then as soon as Trump leaves, when it's President Vance or whoever in 2029, he's like, all right, there's no real security guarantee. We're going right back in. Because that is the game. That is what matters. Because Putin has designs on more than just Ukraine. And it not only that, we talked about this before, it sends the message, and this is absolutely true, to countries like China, which is eyeing Taiwan, that we're back into the bad old days where great powers, or even just medium-sized powers, could just decide to take over their smaller neighbors. That was a chaotic world. That was a world that didn't lead to global stability and peace. That was a world that led to chaos and war. And that is what Putin wants to go back to. Like, for instance, today, what Trump said when he echoed Putin's talking points that Ukraine started the war, Ukraine wanted to be in NATO. If you actually listen to what Putin says, yes, of course he doesn't want NATO in Ukraine. Everyone understands that. But Ukraine wasn't in NATO. Ukraine didn't attack Russia, and Russia invaded them anyway. Why? Well, if you listen to the Tucker Carlson interview, which I did when he went over and interviewed Vladimir Putin in that kind of shameful display of kiss ass, there was actually some interesting things in there where Putin spent a long time in that interview explaining in great painstaking detail why he doesn't really consider Ukraine to be a separate country.
Yeah.
He considers Ukraine to be an accident of history. He considers it to be a part of Russia. And for a long time, it was a part of the Soviet Union. They speak Russian in large chunks of the country, although that has changed a lot in recent years. They have obviously ties. He considers that to be part of Russia. It's not just, oh, I don't like NATO. I don't want NATO expanding. It's, I want that land. I want to control that country. And at the end of the day, he's not going to stop from that goal unless there is a real deterrent. And if you're Ukraine, why would you ever agree to a deal that doesn't have a real deterrent. And that's why Ukraine has not accepted a deal. That's why Ukraine did not take that mythical deal that Trump talks about from the early days of the war, is because it did not include a security guarantee. And if you're Ukraine and you've just been invaded by Russia, what possible motivation would you have to accept a quote unquote peace deal that gives you no real security guarantee in the future? Why would you agree to that? You might as well just keep fighting. As awful and as terrible as it is, you might as well just keep going, because the alternative would be to set yourself up to be invaded and taken over later.
Yeah, you got to remember too, Putin goes back before the Cold War even ended. So I do like your point about, him considering it part of Russia and that being one of the main reasons he's there. I guess one of the things I do agree with President Trump on is Europe really stepping up here. We've held the mantle with our military industrial complex since post World War II to, prop up NATO and really support it. Not that they don't do something, but if you look in terms of dollars spent, it's de minimis relative to what the United States has put in to NATO and, security forces around the world. Some of the politics of that argument being that these countries, instead of putting money into their military, they're putting it into social programs, things like that. While I find that a somewhat interesting argument, I mean, it makes sense if you have tax dollars to spend and you're not putting a tremendous amount into your military expenditures, you do have more money for social nets and programs and all those different type of things. But I don't think it's unreasonable for the United States to ask for more from European countries in defense of Europe, because ultimately, I don't think Russia is. I guess I'm approaching this like logically, right? But if Russia does go through Ukraine, like what's next? Like that's like
stop.
It's a hypothetical
Poland
question.
is next.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
NATO countries are next.
Right.
And then we're in a completely different world. If you don't stop them now, you may have a really serious situation later. And that's the argument. It kind of comes down to, what do you think the nature of Putin is? Do you think he's the kind of guy who, when he sees weakness, will just then decide to stop? Or do you think he's the kind of guy who, when he sees weakness, will continue to push to take more and more and more?
I don't know if that's a gamble I want to take.
He's the latter. Right. Yeah, he's the latter. But to your point, that's one of the things I like about Trump in his first term, and now, is he wants NATO countries to contribute more money, to spend more money on their defense. Biden did too, by the way. Yeah. And during the Biden administration, a lot of those countries hit the threshold of, I think it's 2% of GDP. They want to bump that up. Trump has suggested 5% of GDP, which, by the way, we are way under that in America. We're at like 3%, and we spend a ton of money on defense. So if we went to 5% of GDP,
oh my God,
that would be a massive increase in our own spending, which, if you look at our budget deficits and our debt of 36 trillion, I don't think DOGE could cut enough to make up for that.
No, I don't think so either.
But the point is, yes, if this ends where the Europeans step up their game, put boots on the ground in Ukraine to secure that country and give a real security guarantee, and Ukraine comes out of this with much of their territory intact. Sure, they're going to have to give up some of it, Crimea, probably some of the parts of the Donbass. But if they get to keep most of their territory and they have a real guarantee of security against future Russian aggression led by the Europeans, I'll be the first to say, great job, President Trump. But I just have a feeling that Trump wants a deal more than he wants the right deal.
Yeah.
I think he wants the deal so bad. Remember, he said on day one he was going to solve it. Day one, when he came in, all of a sudden he was going to get a deal. And so my guess is that he will just take a deal, and that would be a deal that would be beneficial.
Well, ultimately, Ukraine has to accept the deal. I mean, that's one of the things I think that we're missing. Look, I like the idea as an American that we're leading on this. It is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. And I think that's putting it actually a little mildly, considering what's happening in Ukraine. But I don't think we do these things well. I think post World War II, we have intervened and led in a lot of areas that have ended up in complete and utter chaos. I mean, just recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, what a cluster that was. And you can go further back. I mean, interfering in Venezuela. You can go all over the world, like all the things that we do that we lead on to try and prop up these governments that never really works out. But at the same time, I think that's us. Like, there's a problem. We're like, we got it. We'll take care of it. Whatever. Like, that's our role in the world. So I kind of go back and forth on that, whether I like us being in that position or not, because I'm really not sure, given the last 60 years, what makes us think that that is our role. It's kind of like in Israel, not to like, I know we always conflate those wars, but it's just like in Israel. I don't think we're solving that one. Like, I just don't. I like that we have input and we do things, but ultimately, I think it should be up to the people who it impacts. And what impact we have to consider what impact that has on us, and our national security. So, like, it's great to say out loud, like, hey, like, let's let the Europeans back this up. But I think history has shown if Europe doesn't step up, there's tremendous incentive for us to step in again and lead another
You're right.
cluster.
Europe's grown too dependent on us. What did you think about DOGE? In our lost episode last week that never aired, you had mentioned that you thought they were winning the public relations battle.
Oh, the narrative. I maintain that they are still winning the public relations narrative. I mean, there was a court victory today. You saw that? I don't want to misquote it, but I believe
this was the one that Judge Chutkin, the district judge who allowed DOGE to
access federal data,
some of these records. Yeah, some of this data. Yeah, she denied the temporary injunction. She hasn't ruled on the full merits.
Oh, right.
Of the case,
No.
She said they're not going to get right. So DOGE has had a mixed record. They've had some wins in court. They've had some losses in court.
They've had more losses than wins, by the way. But what I'm saying is the losses have not been as publicized, in my opinion, as like this win. So, like, when I talk about winning the narrative and the way that people perceive it, dude, I really think that people like that someone is in there mixing it up. And even if it turns out to not be 100% accurate, it's only probably been, 50% accurate? It doesn't matter. Like the $15 million in condoms and all that stuff, like it turns out that's not even true. But like people don't have the attention span for the details. They just know that it is not profound to say that tax dollars are misspent and misused. Like, that happens all the time. But it's a lot, I know this will be shocking to people. It's a lot different running Apple or Tesla or Google, the biggest companies in the world, than it is the US government. I don't think people really have a concept of just how large of an apparatus that is and what it takes to function at even a reasonable level.
Right. And there is certainly some waste, fraud, and abuse, and I'm all for getting rid of it. But I think what DOGE is going to find is it's really hard to cut a lot of this spending. And it's not all kind of low-hanging fruit like some of the foreign aid. And so they're like, if you look at their website, they put up a website with a lot of things, a lot of claims they've made about the billions and billions they've cut. But when you look at the details, it really doesn't appear that they have documentation to back up most of that. And we'll see what the federal spending numbers turn out to be. They certainly are reducing the workforce by tens of thousands of people. But even that's being done in kind of a haphazard way. Like, they fired a bunch of people in Texas who they then realized were in charge of keeping our nuclear stockpile up to
Very
date.
important
and so
job.
They had to rush around and hire.
Very important.
It's so haphazard, and that's the problem with it. It's not that cutting is necessarily bad. Like, sure, but it's the way it's being done, and it opens you up to A, criticism that it's disorganized, but B, down the road even more so, if something bad happens in any aspect of the government because of understaffing, and it can all be traced back to some of these cuts, you have opened up a tremendous vulnerability for yourself politically. And that, I think, is something that is underrated. I think eventually the momentum, the pendulum will swing back. I think it's already starting. And I think the pendulum swings back. Musk's already very unpopular. If you look at approval ratings, even among Republicans, he's starting to lose popularity. And I think that's because people kind of see it looks a little disorganized at this point. But the full effects won't be visible for a long time. And so I think it's going to take a little while for all of that to bubble up to the surface. But in the meantime, at least they can say, hey, we're doing something. We have this problem. We're doing something. What I really don't like is whether they have access to certain data, the courts can work that out. What I really am concerned about is money that is appropriated by Congress and was signed into law and is being clawed back. They have been stopped by the courts from doing most of that, luckily. But there were some things that it appears they still are withholding that they shouldn't be, or trying to withhold money that was approved by Congress. And look, you can argue about whether or not that money was well spent. On USAID, there were some grants for plays and newspapers and things around the world that, okay, maybe we don't want to spend that kind of money. We're 36 trillion in debt. You can make an argument. But also there was the program that helped AIDS in Africa, saving millions of lives over the decades. Malaria, fighting malaria, literally feeding starving children with food made in America, bought from American farmers. That is crazy to try to pull that away, especially when it's already been appropriated. But the larger point is the presidency is still stealing more and more power from the other branches of government. That's happened before Trump, but now it's supercharged.
I was going to say Bush really led the charge on that.
Trump, well, it goes back to Teddy Roosevelt, but this is a whole nother ball game. And just some of the examples. It's not just the firing. How about now we're up to eight Department of Justice employees have quit over the Eric Adams case, which appears to be a blatant quid pro quo. If you're not following this, Eric Adams was charged with, I think, 5 counts of corruption. The Trump administration dropping the case, and Eric Adams essentially saying, according to some of the prosecutors there through his lawyers, I'll work with you on immigration, on deporting people, letting you into Rikers, if you drop the charges, wink, wink. And this isn't me saying that. And so all of these employees of the Justice Department, they kept trying to find someone to submit the charges to be dropped, and they kept quitting. They were just kept quitting. An 8th Justice Department employee quit today. He said in a letter to the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, I cannot fathom how anyone would do this to the public servants that they are supposed to be leading. And this was my favorite quote. This was from, these are not liberals, by the way. One of the people who quit was clerk for Antonin Scalia, was a member of the Federalist Society. Yes. One of them, this gentleman, Hagen Skoton, he did multiple tours in Iraq, won multiple Purple Hearts, clerked for Chief Justice Roberts, went to Harvard Law, not a liberal. He resigned, and he said in part of his resignation letter, quote, I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me. Please consider this my resignation.
Yeah,
I mean, these are people who are just, not only are they resigning, they are burning it down on the way out because of how corrupt it is. In fact, Governor Hochul, I didn't even know this until the other day. Apparently in New York, the governor has the power to remove a mayor. It has never happened in 230 years, right, but 250 years. But apparently Governor Hochul has this power. So she's convening a meeting that was today with people to consider removing Eric Adams as the mayor of New York because of this stuff. And so again, Trump has leeway right now. He's still in kind of that honeymoon phase. There's a lot of stuff going on, but these are the kind of things that stick to you, is when stories like this break through, people resign, and it looks like there is at the very least a hint of corruption.
One of the things that I want to turn back to is running the government like a business, and why I often don't like people in business running government. That was actually, you and I have talked about this on the show before. Trump, despite everything else, my biggest thing with him was when he was running is he didn't know what the nuclear triad was. He didn't. Yeah, this is really important if you're going to be the president. But more than that, he didn't fundamentally understand how government worked. You know, he just thought he barked out orders and then people jumped, and then that's what happened. He figured out between the last time he was president and this time a little bit more about how to actually function within the boundaries of the government and how it works. But going back to like letting go all the employees, I mean, obviously, this is Trump, not Elon Musk. But what Musk did when he purchased Twitter is very similar to what he's doing within the federal government now. And the reason is because Twitter was losing money, much like the American government is losing money. And what do you have that you can save money on immediately? Well, it's terminating employees, not paying their health care, not paying the payroll taxes, not paying their salaries, etc. And immediately you have an influx of cash. I don't think that's what is happening here. I don't think it's specifically to save money. I think it is a little chaotic. But X actually ended up being fairly successful because in a business, you can make these kinds of decisions and then figure out what the consequences are later and still have a sustainable business. You can't do that in government. There are simply too many moving parts. And
Right.
look, not everyone who works in the federal government has a critical position. Like that's a fallacy too. But there are enough people that have critical jobs that like how can we let people working in nuclear facilities go? Like that's insane. Like that's insane. So I would hope look, I think Elon is a smart guy. I really do. And honestly, man, I kind of made a joke about this for a long time, but I am serious. I want these people to be successful, because of course I do.
We need them. Right.
I have a mutual interest.
As Dave Chappelle said on Saturday Night Live right after the election, we're counting on you.
Right.
The people that didn't vote for you are counting on you.
We're counting on you, man.
We're counting on you. We are all counting on you. And look, I want to be clear. I am not opposed to big cuts in spending. I think we need that. I'm not opposed to Elon Musk being part of the government. He's a smart guy. Let him in there. I'm not opposed to looking at things. What I am opposed to is the haphazard, chaotic, ineffective way it's being done. Take, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, and let Elon Musk and his merry band of brothers like Big Balls, remember the guy who had the acronym Big Balls, which was hilarious to hear people on the news networks. I like the CNN reporter.
Oh, it's always nice.
The CNN reporter was like, he goes by the unfortunate nickname Big Balls online. That like let those people have time, prepare a report. You have Donald Trump in the White House. You have a Republican majority in the Senate. You have a Republican majority in the House. You literally have a DOGE committee in the House chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene. You could not find someone more pro-MAGA. Take a few months. Come up with your recommendations. Submit them to the DOGE committee. Have them pass through the House and the Senate and have Trump sign them and do it in an orderly way when you have control of the government. I think, first of all, it avoids the chaos, but also gives you time to vet some of these ideas so you don't make any mistakes. And also, it gives you something, and this is where Trump, I think, is failing so far. It gives you something lasting. Executive orders, executive action, no matter how dramatic they are, they can be undone by the next person with executive action. But if you put it into law and have it pass the Congress and signed by the president, then it becomes permanent. Then you don't have to worry about these court fights and about if you are usurping the power of Congress. And that is the way you should do it. So it's not like I'm opposed to cutting spending at all. The way it's being done probably in a lot of cases violates the Constitution and it's not effective and it's potentially dangerous.
Right.
It's potentially dangerous.
Well, that's what I was going to land on. It's like, I love to have fun, but my God, like these things have real life, real world consequences, not just on families, but you talked about, where American food was being sent and how people rely on it and like those type of things. The ripple effect of this chaos is just, I hate to make it an emotional thing, but like, man, it is very sad.
It is. And there's these USAID employees, even if you don't like USAID, pulling the rug out from under them. When I was reading some stories the other day, there's like 30 or 40 of them that are pregnant. Yeah. They can't get care now. They're losing their health care. They're in another country. Some of them don't have homes back in the United States because they've lived overseas for a while. Their kids are in school there, and now they have nowhere to go. I mean, what this is just not the way to treat these people like on a base level. I know government workers get a bad rap, and sure, some of them are bad, but the vast majority of them are just people trying to do a good job. And the message you send to people is don't come to the federal government to work unless you are hardcore MAGA. And look, there are some smart, effective, I'm sure, hardcore MAGA people, but I want other smart, effective people in government too. And you're sending a message to them not to do it. I have example after example. Today, a senior criminal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. resigned after refusing to investigate and pursue an asset freeze into a government contracted awarded during the Biden administration. This U.S. attorney said there was no evidence, and rather than try to go forward, they just resigned, as many of these people are doing. The top official at the Social Security Administration stepped down yesterday after members of DOGE sought to access sensitive personal data about millions of Americans. It's happening over and over and over again. The trans people in the military. Trump essentially has banned trans individuals from serving in the military. That has gone to court. This was from the court hearing today. The judge said, can we agree that the greatest fighting force is not going to be impacted in any way by the less than 1% of the soldiers using a different pronoun than others might want to call them? The attorney for the government said, I can't agree with that. The judge said, would you agree that if our military is negatively impacted in any kind of way that matters by the use of pronouns, we have a much bigger problem? It's a pretext. It is frankly ridiculous.
Oh,
If you
wow.
want to get an officer of the U.S. military who is willing to get on the stand and say that because of pronoun usage, the U.S. military is less prepared, I will be the first to give you a box of cigars. So this is what I'm talking about. The legal system is pushing back on a lot of this stuff, but the damage, in many ways is real and is affecting real people, our fellow citizens. All right, Brian, let's move on to the world of sports. I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition, shall we say, because you had the NBA All-Star game with a new format over the weekend. Instead of the East versus West, they divided it up into 4 teams and they played a tournament with 4 8-man teams. So you had a new format. Normally this would be the NHL All-Star weekend as well, but the NHL did not do an All-Star game this year. Instead, they did this 4 nations tournament where you had the best players in the world from US, Canada, Finland, and Sweden, I think. Yeah, fight it out in a round robin tournament. The championship game will be Thursday, the US and Canada. And when the US and Canada played their pool play game over the weekend on Saturday night, that was like must-see TV.
Yes.
The Canadians are booing the national anthem. There's 3 fights in 9 seconds. It turned out to be a really good game. What did you make of kind of the difference in how these two sports, approach their mid-season break?
It's interesting because when I was a kid, I really liked the exhibition games, the Major League All-Star game, the 3-point contest, dunk contest, the All-Star game itself. I really enjoyed watching the best players play. And I think part of that was I was a kid, but the other part of that was I didn't have access to a lot of those players, because of the way television was. The West Coast teams weren't on TV that much. So like for a modern reference, it would be like you very rarely would get to see Shohei Ohtani play. But when he played in the All-Star game, it was prime time on the East Coast and you could watch, Shohei play. I don't know who a reference would be back in the day, but you get what I'm saying. So I think these exhibition games have been hurt by the modern access to it. And I give a lot of credit to the NHL for recognizing that, coming up with a great concept, and now having something that they can market and sell year over year. It's not because the NBA isn't trying. The main issue in the NBA is that the players don't care. And it's not that you can tell from their body language or whatever. They are saying out loud, we don't care. And hockey players are like fighting each other when the puck drops. What fans want to see at the end of the day, these guys, I know it comes back to the money a lot of time, but I'm just talking about it emotionally. You're being paid tens of millions of dollars to play a game. Do something that children dreamed of, and grown men and women are incredibly jealous of because they would give anything instead of going to their 9 to 5 to play basketball, let alone for that amount of money. And when you come out and you complain about it because you're tired and the game doesn't mean anything, people don't want to hear it, man. They just don't. All of this is to say, I think the NBA, the problem is not just with their exhibition game. The problem is overall that fans are really. I'm a fan of the NBA. I am. That said, you know when I tune in, buddy? The NBA playoffs. That is when I watch NBA basketball because there are stakes involved and someone's going to win or lose. Like this in season tournament was a great idea for that reason. Now, of course, it's not, the Larry O'Brien trophy, but at least it's a competition. People are trying to win it. You're seeing the effort. When the vast majority of your calendar is filled with games that the players are telling you they're really not that interested in playing, they have a crisis on their hands. They really do. So anyway, just in summary, kudos to the NHL. I mean, it's fantastic. I'm not a huge hockey fan, but I love anytime countries play each other. It's like I'm not a very big football fan or soccer, as we call it in the U.S. But, dude, I watch the World Cup every 4 years. I watch the UEFA championships. I love the European leagues because those games have stakes and they matter, and there's countries involved. Put on that American flag, buddy. Like, I don't want to get booed by Canada.
Right. And I agree with you. I'm not much of a hockey fan, but I'll be watching Thursday for that championship game in Boston with the US and Canada. And I think for the NBA, probably the best thing they could do is the same thing, is to do the US versus the world. And Giannis talked about this after the All-Star game. A lot of players. Now, they point out that 70% of the NBA is American, 30% non. So it's not technically, quote unquote, fair if you did two teams of equal numbers, but who really cares? At the end of the day, it's close enough that I think you could make it work and you could figure it out. And that, I think, would be stakes. I think certainly the non-American players would take it seriously. And I think the American players would too, because they would see, whoa, these guys are really trying. And it would be really cool to see that. I mean, they're not as deep, the non-Americans, but that starting five, when you could roll out like Giannis, Jokic,
Luka,
SGA, Luka. I mean, that is Wemby. I mean, that is no joke. The Americans might be the underdog in that. So I would love to see it. I think that would be the easy, quote unquote, fix. I admit I didn't really watch this year. I watched like maybe 10 minutes. It seemed to me like that when I was watching, they weren't really trying any harder than they did the last couple of years when it was East versus West. So I don't know if it was any better this year or not with a new format, but I think that would be the format to work. In terms of the wider issues with the NBA, I do agree with you. The length of the season does hurt them. Guys sit out a lot of games with, fairly minor injuries. There isn't always a great effort, especially earlier in the year. But I think the only way you could really fix that, other than adding more games to maybe the in-season tournament play that they have now, is maybe you do something radical and you do like you split the season into halves. And the champion of each half, those teams play for the finals. So maybe, you know what I'm saying? So you play like 40 games and then you have an 8-team playoff. And that person is your first half champion. And then you do 40 more games with an 8-team playoff. And that team is your next champion, quote unquote. Then those two teams play each other for the NBA title. And that, I think, would add stakes and make games early in the season more meaningful. But that would be a dramatic change, obviously, from the way it's structured now. But that's the only thing, because you're not going to give up games. You're probably not going to shorten the game.
Well, you can't,
not going to give up
because of your television partners, and there's a lot that goes into it.
And people talk about the NBA struggling. And look, I know there is some ratings decline, but the NBA still does very well.
Oh, it does.
Especially internationally. And when you compare it to anything except maybe the NFL, which you can't compare anything to the NFL.
No, that's not fair.
The institution. I mean, the NFL and even college football kind of is like the stepchild of the NFL. Those two are entities among to themselves, not just in sports, but in terms of just culture. Like they have become bigger than basically any entertainment event, not just sporting events. So I think the NBA, I think it's overrated to crap on the NBA product. I watch regular season games sometimes, and I still think they're pretty entertaining. And I think a
Oh
lot of
no,
times the guys are actually playing hard.
I
There
told
just
you.
aren't those stakes because it's such a long season.
Yeah, I watched the Rockets play a few weeks ago, and I was like thoroughly impressed by their young team and like the effort that they put out. Like that was a good game. I guess my larger point is your stars talking about it, and
Yeah.
this whole idea of Kevin Durant, who is one of the greatest players of all time, basically giving voice to this thing is stupid and I don't like it. Like, I don't know.
Right.
That's not a great idea overall to market the product.
Well, Durant's point was, though, not that it's stupid. Durant's point is, so what that it's bad? His point was,
Right.
yeah, it's bad basketball, but that doesn't matter because all it is a showcase. And it's
Right.
like, well, no, dude, because you're competing for eyeballs and entertainment and you're getting dogged by this incredible
But that,
success that
yes,
hockey is
I
having.
was paraphrasing.
Right. I
I
get
know he
what you're
didn't
saying.
say it was
Now,
stupid.
now the reason I didn't watch much of the NBA All-Star game on Sunday is because I was watching the SNL 50th
50.
anniversary celebration. Did you watch it?
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't. Let
Dude,
me tell
I'm
you,
telling you,
I
I
have
consume things like the slam dunk contest. Didn't watch it, watched all the clips on YouTube. SNL at 50, didn't watch it, watched all the clips on YouTube. Like I'm
okay, so
part of
you
the
saw the
problem.
clips.
Yeah, I saw the clips. The A
Yeah, you
minor
are.
song.
I actually watched the whole thing, the SNL 50, and
Yeah.
I will have to say it wasn't great, but it was solid and there were some nice moments. And the thing was, because I was thinking, why do I care so much about this? Because I have throughout my life, I've had kind of a casual relationship with SNL. Like I've had parts of my life where I watched it a lot, parts where I didn't even watch it at all. I check in here or there. Now lately, I mainly just watch clips the next day if they come
Yeah.
out, on X. But I think it was the fact that you just have to be impressed by the cultural institution, the
Yes.
longevity of that show, the talent, obviously, that has come through it. And also, this goes back to what we were just talking about with sporting events. Other than NFL football, and particularly the Super Bowl, we just have very few things anymore that bring us together. When you had
Yeah.
three networks, everybody watched the same things. Everyone in
Cheers.
America watched the finale of MASH, and
Right.
right, people watch Cheers. But now the media landscape is so scattered, and that's I think why Saturday Night Live has such a special place in people's hearts. Is that legacy is incredible, and you saw it in that room. I
Yeah.
mean, that was Jack Nicholson was there, Robert De Niro, Steven Spielberg, Jerry Seinfeld, every Ryan Reynolds even was there, despite and Blake
Yeah.
Lively, despite their
It's
issues
a
they
bad
got going on.
idea.
Plus, all the people that have ever been pretty much on Saturday Night Live. There are a few exceptions, like Dan Aykroyd wasn't there. I think what's the guy's name who was on Barry?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or he wasn't there. But it was incredible to see all that talent together. And also, I think when you're of a certain age, I think there is a point in your life where Saturday, at least maybe this is still true, where Saturday Night Live is like a big deal. And I think for you and I think that period of time is like your early teens. So for you and I, that would have been the early 90s. And I don't know if you remember the early 90s. It's been a while. But my favorite movie for a long time was Wayne's World, which obviously came from the Saturday Night Live skit. So that cast, Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, those people, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, that's when I was really into it. And so I think most people, I think, go through that, where there's a period of your life where you attach to a certain cast. And the fact that it's still going today is really remarkable. So I appreciated it for the cultural significance. And I thought, did you see the Adam Sandler song part?
No.
Did you see that clip? Oh my God. It was so good. He got up with his little guitar and he started doing kind of one of his like cheesy, funny songs, parody songs about Saturday Night Live. But then there was a TV screen behind him. And as he kept going, it started to get kind of sentimental. And he started singing about some of the people who had died, like Chris
Yeah, yeah.
Farley, and Norm Macdonald, and just the legacy of it. And he was getting choked up as he was doing it. And I think people in the audience were getting choked up. To me, that was the best moment of the whole thing. Is I thought Adam Sandler really gave like a really poignant a poignant performance there. So I really enjoyed it.
It was Bill Hader, by the way.
Bill Hader, that's who I'm thinking of. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna check out the Adam Sandler song when we're
Check
done.
it
I,
out.
I probably should have watched that show. I do agree with you. For me, I've enjoyed Saturday Night Live, but I was never a huge fan of it in
Mm.
general. I never sat down. I don't believe I've ever watched a full episode of Saturday Night Live ever in
Oh,
my life.
really? Not
No,
even when
but
we were younger? Not even
no,
like our early teenage years?
no,
Wow.
I never did. I would make it through the opening monologue and like the first three bits, and then you know me, dude. I like to go to bed
Oh,
early.
yeah.
I get
I
tired,
understand.
so I'll have to go back and watch it. All of that to say, though, I enjoyed all the things that came from Saturday Night Live, and what you're saying about the legacy really is true. The Chevy Chases, the Bill Murrays, the Steve
Oh,
Martin,
Eddie
who
Murphy.
famously was not a cast member. I mean, you're talking about some of the greatest comedians of all time, on
Of all
top
time.
of people who, this is really like for me, that shaped our lives. You know, every
Yeah.
Christmas I watch A Christmas Vacation. That's Chevy Chase, obviously Saturday Night Live adjacent. You know, some of my
Yeah.
favorite movies of all time, like Old School, is not Saturday Night Live, but it's Will Ferrell as Frank the Tank.
Right.
You know, like
That's right.
those are just films that ones that I show my kids, because
Yeah.
they obviously they meant something to me. So looking through it with that prism um, is pretty cool. And kudos to Warren Michaels, man. I know he gets enough kudos, but it's remarkable to
Yeah.
have a comedy skit show last 50
Right.
years. Like that is
Right.
amazing. To stay
It
relevant for
really is.
50 years is
Right. And
just remarkable.
launch all of those careers. And I think it might even be more relevant today than it's been in a long time, maybe ever, especially when you get in a political season, because that cold open, when they have people impersonating whoever it is, Trump, Harris, those things become huge, huge news. And I heard this the other day. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know this, and this just shows you how fractured our media landscape is. Saturday Night Live is NBC's #1 rated entertainment program, which is crazy because it airs at 11:30 at
Yeah,
night on a Saturday. But that obviously is a sign of the times because primetime shows have a
no one
fraction of the
cares.
ratings they used to. But that is incredible that has become their linchpin, really. And it's really amazing. All right, Brian, do you have any reviews this week? You saw the new Marvel movie, right?
I did. I've been debating how I wanted to talk about Captain America: Brave New World for some time. I actually saw it twice,
Oh
which
my
is
God.
well, it's because Sebastian had a tennis tournament, so I took his little brother Oliver on Friday night because he had to wake up early on Saturday, and then when Sebastian got back from his tennis tournament on Sunday, I told him that I would take him, so I went to see it again on Sunday. So I did a Friday Sunday back to back. Um, I haven't really looked to see how it has been reviewed online, so I could come into this and give you an actual like my thoughts on it without repeating someone else's thoughts. I feel like the movie was basically Hulk 2. I think what happened is because Marvel is still in a fight with Universal over the use of the Hulk and having its own independent movie, I think they used Captain America Brave New World to close the loop on the Hulk arc. Because Hulk is one of the most popular characters in the Marvel universe, obviously, and it attracts a huge audience. So my thoughts are thus: Anthony Mackie did a wonderful job coming in playing Captain America, but there is only one Captain America, and that is Chris
Yes.
Evans. And this
That's
is
Chris
not an
Evans.
indictment on Anthony Mackie or the job he does. He can only deal with the hand that he was dealt. And what he was dealt was a Captain America movie, which is actually a Hulk movie that, in my opinion, in the arc of the stories that are to come and to be told, this movie was completely unnecessary and irrelevant. I think you
Really?
could have had a Marvel Cinematic Universe and not had this movie because it doesn't do a good enough job of what I just said, making Anthony Mackie Captain America, the Captain America to reassemble the Avengers and take leadership of this. The void that Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans have created as Iron Man and Captain America into this next part of the Marvel Universe, it can't be overstated. It's so huge that no matter who you bring in or what they do or what story they tell, it is never going to meet the expectations of Infinity War and Endgame. I would love to be proven wrong, but I can't think of how in the world they could possibly do it based on the last 4 or 5 years of what I've seen come out. I think they would have a better chance of making Deadpool the leader of the Avengers, which from a comic book perspective is preposterous. But just from like the standpoint of like making money and having huge entertainment properties, dude, I don't know what I don't know what they can do. I hope that the movies that come out later this year, Thunderbolts looks like it's going to be an excellent movie. I'm the most excited to see the Thunderbolts movie. Are you familiar with the Thunderbolts?
No, I've kind of checked out of Marvel, but I have questions for you.
Okay,
Are
please.
you taking questions?
Yeah, I'll take questions. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Well, first of all, just as a movie, let's first set aside the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. Just as a film, give me your rating of this movie.
I give it a 6 out of 10. And that is only because of the great performances of the actors involved and the remarkable Harrison Ford.
Oh, I didn't even know Harrison Ford was in it. That's how out of it I've been.
Harrison Ford is Red Hulk.
Okay, yeah, that was my question, because you mentioned, and again, I have now become, after Endgame, the new Marvel, has lost me. I enjoyed Loki, I enjoyed WandaVision, but after that, I've kind of checked out. I'll get back in maybe if they convince me that the quality has risen back to the level that, that will make me want to give my time to them. But explain this Hulk thing to me. So the guy who played the Hulk in the Endgame saga.
Well, that was Mark Ruffalo.
That was Mark Ruffalo.
But this is
no
Mark Ruffalo is not. This is a different Hulk. Yes, it's Red Hulk from the comic.
There are two. Okay, so
there's
a Red Hulk and a Green Hulk.
There's Red Hulk. There's the
Green Hulk,
the Incredible Hulk, and then the Hulk has a son. I don't know if you remember that.
Hulk, is that Hulk Jr. or?
Yeah, well, the thing is, man, you're never going to be able to keep up with all this.
Is Red Hulk a bad guy or a good guy?
So that is he's not a good guy or a bad guy.
He's confused.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the original Incredible Hulk. The Hulk, hasn't always been an Avenger. He hasn't always been a good guy.
That's true.
He's a raging monster who the army was tracking down.
So Red Hulk. So Mark Ruffalo is no longer playing the Hulk.
No, Mark Ruffalo is going to continue playing the Hulk, but he is not in this film.
Oh, okay. So there may come a movie where there is the regular Green Hulk we all know and love and the new Red Hulk in the same film.
Yes, because there's going to be Battle World, which I don't have time to explain to you. There's not enough. There's not enough time.
My final question: the man who is the new Captain America, who
Anthony Mackie.
What was
Anthony Mackie
replacing Chris Evans as? I mean, I guess it's not technically the same character. It's Captain America, but he's not like.
No, they've explained all this. Yes,
right.
He's Falcon, who Chris Evans makes Captain America, and he has wings that come from Wakanda, and a shield that came from Captain America, and armor that came from Iron Man, and a mask that came from Ant-Man. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he is now. We don't know this for sure because we don't know exactly how the new Avengers
will come together.
The Avengers will come together for the new sequence of movies coming in the next few years. Is it understood that he will be the central figure, kind of like Chris Evans was in the original Avengers?
Well, Harrison Ford, who plays the president of these United States, Thunderbolt Ross, has asked Captain America to reestablish the Avengers. Like, they think it's important because of the threat that's coming in, and they don't think they deal with it. Now, how Marvel puts all that together, I don't know what they're going to do. But you have Chris Hemsworth, who says that he will come back and play Thor because he loves money. And we all love money. It's fine. I don't blame Chris Hemsworth for
Yes.
that. Thor is a great character. I don't know how much meat is left on that bone. But what I'm saying is like you would like to see younger people coming in, and they were trying to set that up with like young Avengers. The problem is
Yeah.
that no one cares. They
Right.
want Scarlett Johansson in tight pants as Black Widow. They
Don't
want
we all?
Wanda Maximoff in these films. They want the amazing Benjamin Cumberbatch to come back and play Doctor
Yes.
Strange. Like people, they want things that they like, and who can blame them? But it does make storytelling very difficult if you're not willing
Right.
to like. And but this is the thing about comics, and you and I have talked about this before: is someone can die, and you can watch them die, and they can always come back. Like
Right. Exactly.
it's like because this is obviously this is all made up, but
There's a
people get
multiverse,
right.
Brian. So as we know, there's now a multiverse. So what
People
happens
get
in one
people
timeline
get
does not
very
affect the
yeah.
other time.
People get very excited about it. I'm happy that I saw this movie twice. I enjoyed it the second time through as much as I did the first time through. I would recommend that if you're a Marvel fan, you're going to go to this movie and you're going to go, that was fine. But that's how
Okay.
I felt about that's how I felt about a lot of Marvel movies that didn't have the stakes. But you and I have also talked about this before, and the one thing the movie does have going for it, despite having a Red Hulk and a Green Hulk and a Hulk and a Hulk, is it was, to its credit, grounded in reality. There were not space invaders. There wasn't some overpowering threat. It was set up more as like a spy movie, which I
Hmm.
liked. I like that tone
Yeah.
change. And I'll land the plane by saying this, if I may, which is
Oh, you may.
which is Marvel is going to be just fine. This movie's going to make a ton of money. People are going to watch the next one. But what I would like to see happen, because I'm all that really matters, is I would like people to have the creative ability to make movies that they want to make. A great example of
Yes.
this is Taika Waititi making Thor Ragnarok, right? I
That was
didn't
great.
feel
I love
like
that movie.
that was a great movie, but I think one of the reasons that was so great is I feel like that was the best version of that film. I think my issue with Brave New World is that as an outside observer and someone who follows this stuff, I could tell that that movie was cut to pieces. I
Yeah.
bet you there are 8 hours of film that exists somewhere when they were putting this together, and it got into the editing room, and man, Suits butchered this thing. They just chopped it up, and someone was like, "We can't do 2 hours. It's got to be an hour and 48 minutes." And like, so
Yeah.
cut that scene out. So it there are some things where you're like, I don't understand why the character did that. Well, they probably filmed why the character did that, but they just were like, we can't put that in the movie for whatever reason.
Right.
So
Well, part of the
anyway,
problem, and this is a larger problem Marvel has, is part of the problem is you're trying to take these individual pieces and they have to fit in a certain way into the larger narrative.
right,
And that, by definition, limits the creativity
it
of the
does.
people involved in making that production because you have to feed into the larger beast. But I want to talk about White Lotus, Brian, before we get
Oh,
out of
please
here.
do.
Season 3 debuted on Sunday night, and I love White Lotus. I enjoy it very much. I was, of course, watching the debut of season 3 on HBO Sunday night. I tried to get you into White Lotus,
Oh
but you
God.
just you did you even make it through the first season?
No, I watched the first 3 episodes, as you well know, because my wife was sending you pictures of me looking just sad in my chair. Dude, that story, I'm gonna finish it because I started it. I'm gonna finish it, but something better happens soon. It is just boring ass white people doing white people shit. It's
Wow,
so
why do you have to bring
bad.
race into it?
No, what? Because I think honestly, again, because I've read no reviews of White Lotus, I didn't look it up. I just watched it. Are they trying to like? make a statement about like affluent white people and how
Yes.
narcissistic they are and
Yes.
how vapid they are and shallow because
Yes.
I hate every character on that show. I hate them. I don't want a good
Even
thing to
Jennifer,
happen.
wait, whoa, even Jennifer Coolidge?
Yes, she's an alcoholic who can't get over the death of her mother, who just uses people for her own self fulfillment. Look, all that said, that's great acting on the part of Jennifer Coolidge. Because if that's what she's going for, well, mission accomplished. I'm not cheering for Steve Zahn, especially his wife, who is the most narcissistic person I've ever seen. Sydney Sweeney and her friend are dipshits. The son is a maniac. Like, why would I cheer for any of these people? Dude, I need to have someone in a show that I'm cheering
Okay.
for.
That you're that I can see that as your block then because I don't need that. I'm fine not really cheering for anyone, just kind of observing. I love the slow burn of White Lotus. It's not to me the best show on television by any means. I definitely would not put it in my, among my best all time or anything like that. But I think it's a very good
Good
show.
show.
And I think it's become a big hit for HBO. And look, I really like what Mike White does. He's the creator. He writes all the episodes, directs almost all, or if not all the episodes. And it's kind of a singular vision, and which is kind of weird today and unique in big time TV is most of the time they're, efforts for with their group efforts. And he has people help him, obviously, but he is the driving force. And it's his kind of singular vision. And yeah, you're right. He's trying to make a statement, but it's not just a statement about the excesses of wealthy people. That's kind of obvious low hanging fruit. It's more
Well,
about
I'm not that deep, Eric. So,
right. Well, that's true. But no, you're right. That is obviously there. But it's also about the themes of each season with the issues the characters are going through. And they're kind of like archetypes for different people that a lot of us know in our life. Like they might not be exactly the same, but it's like, oh yeah, I kind of know somebody who's kind of like that. And I think the way that they interact with each other, I just think it's a really well done show. And there's something kind of familiar about it. Like the new season just came out. So you're talking about season one, which was
yeah.
during the pandemic, actually. But if you watch season three, different setting. This one's in Thailand. The season you watched was in Hawaii. The second season's in Italy. Different cast for the most part, although there are a few holdovers. But I will say I enjoyed the first episode this year, but it was a little bit too serious. Oh, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert for you, but not for most people listening. Jennifer Coolidge's character dies in season two. So she is not there. And yeah, she is not there in season three. And I think they definitely miss her because she really was the comedic relief
Oh,
for the
she's
first couple of
hilarious.
seasons. She kept it light, and it was it there. So this season, at least so far, we haven't really seen that kind of humor. It's pretty serious. Also, there is the thing that Mike White does with these shows is he's slow and to your point, to your taste, too slow, but he slowly peels back the onion of these characters.
Yeah.
They're just like most of us. They don't reveal themselves right away because that's not how most of us interact with people. We don't
Right.
just come up to someone and be like, here's all my baggage, all my problems, and why I act the
Right.
way I do.
Right.
It reveals itself over time as the situations come up and the drama it builds and intensifies until it reaches the boiling point that you have with the characters each season. So the first episode again with this year is basically them checking into the hotel. You get to know the characters, you know a little bit about the dynamic between them. The thing that is and I will say this about Mike White, he is not afraid to explore, sexuality, infidelity, the kind of compromise. This is what I really like about the show, especially season two really gets into this. The kind of compromises that we make in relationships and love that may not look ideal from the outside, but can work for certain people. I think there's a lot of that. But this season, there's a family that has three children, three adult children. And I mean, it's pretty clear there's some like borderline incestuous stuff
Oh,
going
wow.
on. I mean, like, I don't know how else to say it.
I mean,
the
that's what
final,
killed Godfather 3. What's he doing?
I mean, again, the final scene of episode one, spoiler alert, Arnold Schwarzenegger's son, who plays the oldest son, and his younger brother, who's going to college, they're in their beds, and the older brother's like, "How am I going to masturbate with you here?" and he walks naked into the bathroom with his porn, and the younger brother is like kind of eyeing him up. I don't know. Like maybe their step, maybe we'll find out later they're not blood related. I don't know what's going on. But here's the thing: as weird as that was, it was a
That was
little
weird.
and it was a little weird. I'm not gonna lie. I trust Mike White because he has guided these first two seasons and built. I really think you should stick with it, Brian, because it is one of those things. It is a slow burn,
I said him
but
in.
trust me, it's worth it. The payoff is worth it, I think. And I think it's one of those shows that sticks with you for a while. It ends, an episode ends or the season ends, and you kind of think about the characters and the decisions they made and kind of the way that they navigated different situations. And to me, that's what a great drama is about. A great drama. They each season has a murder mystery because I think you probably need that to bring in the because if it were just about people's
Oh
problems,
no, that
I
would
might
never
like
work.
that show, but I don't. Right, it wouldn't work. So you have to have that element of the murder, but the murder in each season is kind of almost secondary. Like it's there hanging over the season as the backdrop to try to kind of trying to figure out the who done it. You know, in each season they present the murder at the beginning, but you're not sure who the victim is, right? So that is always there trying to figure that out, but that's really not the point of the show. The point of the show is these people, the trauma they have, the baggage they have, and how that interacts with and bounces off these other people with their issues as well. So I really like I respect what he's done. Is it my favorite show on television? No, but I will say that how many shows I haven't found a lot lately where I'm looking forward to them coming back.
Yeah.
And I'm excited when I hear the credit music. The do 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 do. So when I heard this music the other night, I was like, all right. It was like an old friend had come to
I'll
see
be
me.
like that for
Like
House of Dragon.
an old friend. Well, later this so I haven't had this feeling in a while because I was thinking, what's the last show I was really excited to see? And this is the first show in a while that I've been excited to see. I got another one coming up right after this, also on HBO, when The Last of Us season 2 comes out. So that will be another one. But yeah, there aren't as many. But I'm excited for the return of White Lotus. I want you to keep watching and catch up. And then in a few weeks, we'll talk about it again. All right, Brian, we went a little long today, but do you have any final thoughts?
Well, it hurt that I did 10 minutes on Brave New World. I mean,
it's okay.
I'm happy to, like, I know you're making fun of me when you want me to answer these questions, but for whatever reason, that doesn't deter me from answering them.
No, of course not. No, I just want to know more about the baby Hulk. Is he like a cute little green baby? Like, is he a cute little baby Hulk?
When Thor went in Ragnarok, when he went to the junk planet, it is mostly agreed that when he was spending time there, that he had impregnated one of the local ladies, and then that's where his son comes from.
The baby Hulk.
Yeah, he's not a baby; he's like a teenage Hulk now. Because he's going to be part. They can't have a. Well, I guess Baby Yoda. I don't think a baby Hulk would work in marketing nearly as much though as a baby Yoda.
My God, people would love that. You carry around the little baby Hulk.
Yeah, like Baby Groot. Same thing. Maybe that's what they need to do. I think we just gave a Disney executive an idea. There'll probably be a baby Hulk.
There you go.
So I'm good, man.
They need more money.
Yep.
That for Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. Thanks so much for being with us this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. But if not, please take no offense.